At any one time, there are at least 21,000 people working as unpaid interns in the UK. Almost a third of young people who have recently left university are working for nothing in the hope of securing a graduate job.
Hi, I'm Amy Ashenden and I'm here at Britain Needs a Pay Rise March on Saturday the 18th of October 2014 in London.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
And are you worried about unpaid internships?
Yeah, I am worried about unpaid internships because it means that only people who can afford to work for nothing get the best opportunities, and that's not fair on people who don't have the resources to take up unpaid internships.
So Connor, why are you here today?
I'm here as a sabbatical officer because young people have been let down by a whole generation of those with power. We've been screwed over time and time again, and the casualisation of the work market in terms of unpaid internships, 0 hours contracts, all those sorts of things is something that disproportionately affects young people and the members of our union.
Like the rise in tuition fees, scrapping of EMA, and also the fact that lots of young people are graduating and they're being forced to work on 0 hours or to do unpaid internships.
The deficit, bullshit, come off it, the enemy is profit. Students working deficit, do not cause a deficit. Bullshit, come off it, the enemy is profit. Unemployment and inflation are not caused by immigration. Bullshit, come off it, the enemy is profit.
So why are you protesting today?
I'm protesting today because in the last few years there's been a big shift of wealth from the bottom of society back up to the top. I think that affects all people in society, working people and students, and I think it's all important we stand together and take a stand against it.
Max, why are you marching today?
I'm marching today because the Conservative government and the Liberal Democrat government that we've had for the past years has completely kind of attacked workers. We've seen the biggest fall in wages since the 1870s, while those at the top are getting richer and richer. And so I'm here today, stand with the workers and also to promote a demonstration that's happening in November for free education. And it's the first time in decades that students have sought to kind of shape society rather than just react to what the government's doing. So I'm basically here to stand in solidarity with the workers and to hope for a better and a fairer future.
So Beth, you're volunteering for the People's Assembly today. Why do you think it's important people come out and protest?
I think it's really important to send a message to the government just saying we're not happy, People need a pay rise. The gap between rich and poor is the biggest it's been since the 1800s, and it's just not acceptable. Rich people are getting richer, poor people are getting poorer. People who do the most important jobs in society can't afford to pay their rent or eat properly or have a decent quality of life. So I think coming out today and being heard is really important. So that's why I'm here. Up the workers.
Omar, why are you here today?
Okay, we're here because we're students and we are here for two main reasons. We want to support our lecturers on campus, our cleaners on campus. There's been a reduction in wages in real terms over the past 10 years. It's been appalling, and we're here because we support the TUC's message that Britain needs a pay rise. But secondly, we understand that the people who are responsible for these low wages are the same people who tripled tuition fees, who are responsible for our crippling debt at universities. And so we're also having a banner here that says free education because we want to fight for free education as well. There's been a demo on November the 19th for students to actively demand free education. As part of it, we think students and workers have a common interest against the people who are oppressing both of us.
And are you worried about having to do unpaid internships?
I think unpaid internships are immoral. I think loads of universities offer them. I think it's simply immoral to make people work for no money. It means that only the wealthiest of students, people who can afford not to get paid over the summer or over a year, get to go to those jobs. In whole industries like journalism, for example, more and more people are becoming, it's basically becoming only a private school sort of area because, who can afford to be a journalist? You have to work for no money for 5 years. The only people who can do that are the wealthy. So unpaid internships are immoral. We should abolish them, and that's part of the slogan of the march. We fully support that as students.
For a generation that was brought up believing that you go to uni and then you have enough money to get a home, start a family, and it's all a lie.
Time to do something about it. We can't be afraid to fight for our vision of a living wage for all, because it's the only alternative to the unrelenting vision of a miserable vision of a future that's been mapped out for my generation.
Hello, my name is Piers Telemack. I'm Vice President Society and Citizenship at the National Union of Students. I'm here today because we need to make sure that young people's voices are represented in this country. The fact that we are being screwed over by this government is absolutely shambolic. Young people need to mobilise, young people need to unite, and young people need to show that we're a force to be reckoned with.
Following the protest, I got in touch with a young guy who got into the fashion industry through an unpaid internship. Because of his negative experience, he's asked for his face not to be shown and his voice has been changed.
I was so excited to get my foot in the door, just to have somewhere to start and start getting experience. So I took it and ended up staying for 9 months. So I went in on my first day and I was really excited. At that point I was living with my parents, so I could afford not to get paid for a little while.
And what sort of stuff did you do while you were there?
I started doing menial things around the office. It was the only way I could get experience and start a career for myself. About 3 months later, I was starting to feel mugged off by the situation because I was working really hard and I wasn't getting paid for it, and it was starting to take the piss. I'd hoped to have a job by then and I wasn't getting paid commission for bookings I'd been promised either. It got to the point where I just couldn't afford to do it anymore. So I expressed that to the chairman and he found it useful having me around, so he put me on the apprenticeship scheme, which paid £2.68 an hour. So I took the apprenticeship and thought I'll see how long I can last on £375 a month, which was nothing, especially considering that was how much the rail card cost me just to get into work.
What was your experience like?
It started off a really normal 9 to 5, but once I'd been there longer, he'd be ringing me at 3, 4 in the morning, on my days off, screaming at me down the phone because something's gone wrong that wasn't my job. But because I was his PA, and I had to take the flak for that. I'd be in the office until however late he wanted me to be. I'd have to go and pick up his daughters from parties and take them home. There wasn't a set amount of hours. I was his bitch. I was asked to do anything from picking up his lunch, speaking to clients, working on projects, to not so nice stuff like picking up drugs for him. I'd pay off his dealers, I had to book in prostitutes, and then I had to book them into hotels to cheat on his terminally ill wife.
So you had to book prostitutes and hotels for the head of the company?
Yeah, I arranged where they met, what time he'd be getting there, things like that. One morning, I went in and he wanted a free motorbike for a prop and said, "Get it me for free or you're fired." So I was obviously panicking and under a lot of pressure to get it. There were other cases where they'd be offering drugs in his office. One time he was cutting coke on the desk and told me, "Do it, do a line." Another time he had a motorbike he used to ride around London and run errands and I'd be on the back. One time we were going over this flyover and there was this other motorbike and my boss decided to race it. We were going in excess of like 100 miles an hour. I literally couldn't feel my hands. It was raining, I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I've never been so scared in my life.
Leaving London, I travelled to the University of Southampton to meet Lydia. She worked unpaid for 6 weeks at a tech company in London.
I did a lot of the same work as other employees in the company. I researched for corporate bids, I did database management, and at the end of it I had to present my findings over a conference call to the rest of the team. At the end of the internship, after 6 weeks, they told me that if they'd employed an external consultant, the work would have been worth £3,000.
Another student that had done a 6-month internship at a radio station got in touch. Often working 7 days a week and sometimes until the early hours of the morning, he'd compromised on wages for work experience. So I went to meet Jonathan at Solent University to find out whether he felt working for nothing was fair.
I did a 6-month internship at Inspiration FM, which was a local community radio station in my hometown of Northampton. I started off just doing 2 days a week, bog standard, and I used to fit it in between college, and I used to go when I could, and it wasn't too intense, it was quite relaxed, and I was enjoying it, but I wasn't getting really involved. And then I finished college and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do now? Because when you finish college, you've got so many months off, and I just kind of dived in to Inspiration FM because they're the management there are really keen to pull people in if they could. So as soon as they learned you had 3 hours, they'd instantly be like, well, you can come in this day, you can come in this day, you can come in this day. And most people, that scared them off, and they used to like lie about what they were doing in their lives to make sure they didn't go in too much. But me, on the other hand, I loved it. So I was in there all the time. And then I think after a month of doing it 7 days a week, management came to me and said, well, you know, you're pretty much here all the time, you know what you're doing, do you want to be a community, volunteer team leader? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And then, so what that meant was every day I'd get an email from management telling me who's coming in, what I've got to set them to do, how I've got to help them. And before I know it, like the production team was pretty much, like everything in production team I was responsible for. So making sure that breakfast show had 4 packages, 2 box pops, interviews lined up, cues and questions written correctly and saved in the right place. That if that didn't happen correctly, is because it was my fault, because I didn't tell the person who was doing it the right thing. I was quite young. I was only 17 when I was there, and I had, sometimes I felt I had like the world on my shoulders. If I didn't do something, that station was going to blow up. So it was quite stressful, but you just learn how to deal with it and like how to get over it, and how to talk to people with it, and that was a really good thing.
Do you think being charged with so much responsibility that you should have been paid for your time?
It would have been ideal, yeah. I'd love to get paid for it because, I would have been sorted. It's a dream job, and I would have been paid for it. But I know they didn't have the money to do that. They were completely broke. They lost funding, so the chance of them paying anyone was out the windows. So I can completely understand why I didn't get paid, but I didn't mind. I was 17. I was living with my mum and dad. The radio station was only about 30 minutes walk. And I could financially afford not to be paid. Since I worked at Inspiration FM, I went to university to study multimedia journalism, and after my first year I was speaking to the management team at Inspiration, and they were saying to me, oh, come back, and I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to over summer. But the thing I didn't consider is I had all these payments to make, like summer rent, because at university you have to pay for your house over summer, which is ridiculous, and you have to find all this money. So I had to get a job at a sandwich factory, on a conveyor belt, just putting lettuce on the line, and that was 5 days a week, 12 hours every day. And I wanted to go back to Inspiration, but, they weren't paying me, so I couldn't actually go back there, because the 2 days I had off, I was knackered from the sandwich factory. A lot of people around my age, and a lot of people in my course, and friends of friends are all trying to find work experience, and they're all struggling because, oh no, how am I going to do this workplace if I have to stay there for 6 months, and it's going to cost me this much, and I can't afford that, so I can't do it. If the government, perhaps made sure that employers ensured people weren't working for free, I think that has positives and negatives. Obviously positives because, you're earning at a young age, and that's really, it's going to motivate you and make you possibly do more, work more. But at the same time, I know places like Inspiration FM, if that was forced upon them and the government said, you're not allowed to make sure, this guy can't work 3 hours, then they would have no one in that radio station, and the production team would be shut down, and then, then the radio station would be shut down.
It seemed like a lot of young people were affected by this, but they all seemed quite complacent about demanding pay. I got in touch with Chris Hares at Intern Aware, who's leading the campaign to end unpaid internships.
One case that we had recently was someone came to us where they'd been working in the media industry and they found themselves as one of 7 unpaid interns at that organisation. That person took that employer within that industry to court over it and actually won that case. So for their 6 weeks they got their minimum wage that they should have been paid.
What are people's rights when it comes to internships?
So there's no law around interns. You should look at whether you've got set hours and set tasks. Then you would almost certainly qualify as a worker, which means you should be paid the national minimum wage and be treated like a worker. So we get lots of cases come through employment tribunals and different legal channels, and people often win back their pay because they're entitled to national minimum wage as a worker. The one problem that we do have sometimes in terms of making more noise about these kind of situations is the fact that many employers now have seen where we've taken people to court and it's made a big media story of it, where they've had to pay out minimum wage at least for their unpaid interns. Because it's become such a media story, now we're finding more and more places that either settle or when it goes to court, finding a way of making sure that we don't then talk about it. So it would be part of the agreement to say you now can't talk about this particular case, which is a shame because actually being able to show that
this is illegal and that people are entitled to pay is one of the core ways that we encourage businesses and young people to acknowledge the fact that interns need to be paid, and so that can be incredibly frustrating.
Having heard from young people about their experiences, and now this campaign, I wondered whether politicians would be taking notice. With the general election just a few months away, I met with the leader of the Green Party, Natalie Bennett.
So, Natalie, tell me why for you personally unpaid internships are an important issue to address.
I think it's really important to address on a couple of issues. First of all, this is work. In cases where people are expected to turn up regularly for a significant period of time, that is work. It should be paid. That's a principle. But there's also, of course, the fact that it's greatly restricting access, particularly to the more desirable professions, because only some people can afford to do it. You need to be able to have your parents be able to support yourself while you're doing. And I used to be editor of the Guardian Weekly, and it used to horrify me of how many people I'd get coming to me with, master's degrees, a couple of languages, couple of years even of unpaid internships, begging to work for nothing. And there's so few people who can be in that situation, and nobody should be in that situation.
But where do you draw the line between being exploitative and beneficial? Because surely if you ban unpaid internships completely, it's going to cut off people's route into industry.
Well, I think the thing is, there's a line between an internship, say, that's part of your course. So for the Green Party, for example, we have lots of interns who come from America. It's part of their course. They come for a fixed period. They have to write reports on it. They get academic credit for it. That's absolutely fine. I don't see any problem with that at all. And you also get, at the other extreme, volunteering, where, people go and walk the dogs at the local dog shelter and give them a pat once a week. And obviously no one's going to complain about that. But it's a case where, if a business is actually running its operations through using unpaid labour, then those people should be on at least the minimum wage.
So nowadays there's a general feeling that doing an unpaid internship is a prerequisite for getting a job. What was it like when you left university?
Well, I have to confess that I can understand why people would feel pretty peeved about this now. But I mean, I've completed an agricultural science degree. It's a long time ago. I was 17 when I decided to do it, and walked into my first job. That was as a journalist, and I didn't have any training at all. But the boss said, "Oh, you're doing a proper job, so you should get, it's not a trainee job. You're running a whole newspaper." And so I got paid, what was a very decent salary. Kind of, if you roughly compared it to now, it'd be something like being on 25k here in Britain now. And that was my first job, and that was, a month after I finished university.
Okay. And what would the Green Party do if elected in the next general election about the issue?
I think what we need to do is we already have the law that says, if you're working, you should be paid the minimum wage. We absolutely need to enforce that. And we really have to deliver a message to companies that, you can't, train people for free and then take your pick from some of those. You have to have graduate intake programs. You have to have trainee first graduate jobs that then naturally feed through the system, and they have to be paid jobs.
Do you think it's unreasonable to ask someone to work for free for, say, 11 months?
I think that is just astonishingly exploitative. A week, say, you go and try a place out, see what it's like, learn something about it. A week or maybe even 2 weeks is fine. But as soon as once you get beyond that, then you really are into territory of you're doing a job. Maybe it's a temporary job, maybe it's actually a permanent job, but it's a job.
Because I've found that in the run-up to the last general election, the Green Party actually advertised for unpaid interns, 2 at Cambridge for 7 months and 3 in unpaid internships for 11 months to help get MPs like Caroline Lucas elected.
Well, I didn't know about those, and one of the things about the Green Party is that we're very decentralised. Each local party is sovereign, and it's something that, had I known about it, well, I wasn't leader at the time, but had I known about it at the time, something we would have very much stepped on. And I think when we still do advertise for volunteers, but we very much stress that's a different thing. And, volunteering in politics is something people have always done. And we say, this is an opportunity to volunteer. You can come in when and as you like. There's no fixed term. There's no commitment. So it's basically, if you'd like to come and volunteer and help in a campaign, that's great. And that can be anything from, a week to, if you're available and want to do it, quite a long period of time. But the stress is always very much on the flexibility. And that's the way it works.
And what do you think about 0-hour contracts?
Well, the Green Party, we want to ban 0 hours contracts. The fact is, what we need in a much broader sense, not just looking at this issue, but we need jobs that people can build a life on. You need to be able to reasonably sure that you can pay your energy bills, pay for your food, pay your rent at the end of each week. And I was at Oxford University talking to someone there, and their mate had left the previous year. Oxford, reasonably privileged, good degree, but they actually got a phone call at 6 o'clock every morning. They had to be up and ready to go, and then they'd find out if they had work that day. And that's just unbelievably unfair in terms of how you live your life. And that person can get to the end of the week having earned £0. And what are they going to do? They're going to either end up at the food bank or at the payday lender.
Yeah, I think, mass media organisations, they can definitely afford to pay someone to work for them for maybe a week or 2 weeks, just as they do an internship. And they should really encourage doing that, because I know a lot of people, even myself, I was going to apply for work experience at BBC, but I didn't, because I thought I can't afford to live and travel in London for a week. That's that's skyrocket prices. And as a student who's already struggling with student debt, the work experience would have been amazing. I would have learnt so much and it'd be in the industry. But if I couldn't afford to do that, and I think it's kind of wrong that these companies who could easily pay people to do just 1 week or 2 weeks, and to the company, it's just a little bit of money and it's not too much, but it's just that week of learning and that experience for that person. If that happened to me, that week would have remained with me for the rest of my life, because I would have learnt so much. And I think it's a bit unfair that they don't pay people when they could.
So when did you reach breaking point and decide to leave?
It was about after 9 months. I was hanging in there hoping that someone above me in the pecking order would leave and I'd get their job and I'd finally get a contract to make things better. But it wasn't looking like anyone was going to leave, and the way I was being treated was getting worse and worse.
Do you think they took advantage of you being a really enthusiastic young person?
Yes. I think the chairman knew how much I wanted to be there and how much I valued the opportunity, even though I wasn't being treated fairly, so he pushed the boundaries. For instance, I never took a sick day in 9 months. But then one day I came into work with really bad conjunctivitis in both my eyes, and I was still working even though I could barely see the monitors. And he came over to me and said, "Have you finally caught AIDS?" Because I'm gay.
Do you think he would have treated you differently if you were an official employee or slightly older?
Yeah, definitely. With internships, there's no contract, there's no legal support or stability. They can get rid of you whenever they want. If I'd been in a position where I had a contract and a title, the more senior members of staff would have commanded a lot more respect for me. I definitely think that would have helped.